Thanks so much for listening to No Lions Here with me, Big Panda. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to No Lions Here. My name is Big Panda, and I'm a recovering sex addict. Before we jump into today's episode with our special guest, I do want to give a shout out to my sponsor for the episode, Beginning an Institute. If you or anyone you know is suffering from sex or porn addiction, definitely go check them out. They're a big part of my story, and definitely there's a connection there with my guest that I have on today, and we'll get into that here in a little bit. But definitely their information will be in the description. Also, this is the first episode of 2025, so I am pumped to be back. As you can see, I am no longer in the studio where I was, so things have changing, and we'll get into all that in a solo episode. But today's guest, a very special guest. We've been kind of going back and forth, for a while now, and finally getting you on. Welcome to No Lions Here. I have on me with me Nicole. Nicole is a pelvic floor therapist. She's a doctor. She is a mother, a daughter, a friend, a human being. And she is also a betrayed partner and a betrayed daughter. And so First off, Nicole, welcome to No Lions Here. I'm so excited to have you on. Again, we've been going back and forth trying to get you on, and life happens, and that's totally understandable. And I'm really grateful for your willingness and courage to come on and share your story.
Thank you so much. Alex, I was like praying so much on it, and I was like, this is the messiest that my life has ever been. And then I loved your little one-liner, like, let the mess become the message. And I was like, okay, like I just prayed on it. And I'm like, it's time. Like, it's messy, but it's time.
Yeah. So Nicole reached out. You reached out to me on Instagram last year when I moved the podcast onto Instagram. You had already known about the podcast.
Yes,
right?
yeah, and I'm trying to remember, like, when I found out about it. I feel like I must have found out about it through our mutual follower. It had to be Begin Again, I feel like, because I followed them first.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And I remember, you reached out to me and you're like, my husband, and, I'm going to show him the podcast. And then I passed along my number to you to give to him, and him and I have been connected. And, and so, I think it's really cool. And I was sharing before we went on to the air that today is the the date. 4 years ago today, I was discovered by my ex partner, and that's what started the whole shift into recovery. And so the irony's not lost on me that, hey, today, January 11th, 4 years later, one, I'm in the place where I'm at, and two, I get to have on a betrayed partner to share your story for anyone out there, because I know that you are not the only betrayed partner that listens to my show. And like, I gotta say, like, just how cool and how grateful I am for this, because I've gotten emails from other betrayed partners, and I'm sitting here in my mind going, why are you listening to my show? I'm the one that has done the betraying. I'm the one that has caused trauma and hurt in other people's life. Like, why are you listening to my show? And so but I'm really grateful for that, though. I think that it's awesome that, I get people that tune in like that.
Yes, I think there's like a degree of, like, at least for me, like, and I don't know, this could just be my like science background, but like the need to know. And I feel like to truly love someone in an addiction, you have to understand. Otherwise, I feel like it's impossible then to love them if you don't understand.
Yeah.
I really do.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think, I really respect, because I talk to guys in the program where, their partners are on like a need to know basis. They're not. And I know for me, like that doesn't work for me. Like, I want somebody that's involved in my recovery. I want to be able to talk to them about my day to day. Yeah, I still got my sponsor and I still got my other people, but I want my partner to be involved, because if they're not involved fully, then I feel that then I'm an addict. I can hide things. I can hide things really well. And if you're not fully involved, then you can't tell when I'm off.
Mm-hmm.
And my girlfriend, she's real good. You females are so intuitive. So intuitive.
We are. And that, honestly, like, I feel like And that's kind of something that is the hard thing, and something that I'm dealing with my husband. It's like I knew that something was off before, like, D-Day, before the discovery of everything. And then after the birth of our son, I knew again. But it's like getting it, I don't know, like, and you can probably speak to this too. I feel like no matter how much I asked, and I feel like I was asking the wrong questions. I was like, are you looking at anything? Did anything come in the mail that you're looking at? Any sort of pornography, any sort of anything? And it was like, yeah, like, I want to talk about that. Like, how do it takes so long sometimes for something to come out, no matter how in tune I feel I am, and no matter how many questions I'm asking.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I can definitely speak to that, because there was definitely, questions from my former partner that, one, I didn't, before recovery, I mean, I didn't know how to put words to any of these things. There
Mm-hmm.
was a lot of fear there of, man, if I tell her what I'm thinking or feeling, like, and this, obviously, in BAI does a great job of this, of like, it's all traced back to the childhood, right? Like, I wasn't taught how to express myself, how to express my emotions, how to talk, right? I almost got in trouble for doing those kinds of things. And, I was labeling myself as negative for having these negative feelings and negative thoughts, when in reality, like, these are just normal things. But, anytime I got questioned, I mean, even in recovery, like, sometimes I feel like I'm cornered.
Mm,
And then that for me anyway, that really, like, shuts me down. And so learning to work through that and being like, hey, this isn't an attack. They just want to know what's going on. This isn't an attack. Like, this isn't them. This is me. Let me I can try to communicate these things. And still to
mm,
this day, like, I'm in a new relationship, and first sober relationship that I've ever been in, and I still struggle with, like, communicating what's really going on inside of me, because I know for me, and her and I have had this discussion many times of, like, something's off. I don't know exactly what it is, and I don't know what the solution is to work through it. So until I have all of those information, until I have all of that data, I cannot communicate this with you.
mm-hmm.
Which is kind of, which is a lie. Like, I don't need to know everything, and I don't have to know the solution in order for me to I can still communicate, and that helps me kind of work through it. But I still struggle with that, though.
Yeah, yeah, it's really hard. And I think there's that degree of, like, the addict's ability to, like, compartmentalize, I think, is so strong.
Yep.
And I think that is the case with, my husband, Ryan. It's like the ability to just be able to put that away and engage in our separate life. And then this need for, I think you kind of hit on the spot with that, like, his childhood was very that avoidant attachment. And I think that the thought of, if I tell her da 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 da, whatever it is, I will lose her.
Mm. Yes, like that whole, and like, other thing too is, like, I don't want to, and again, this goes back to the childhood. It all goes back to the
It
childhood.
all
It
does.
all does, no matter what. It all does. But, that idea of, like, I don't want to be a burden on you. I don't want
Mm-hmm.
to tell you that maybe I'm struggling with some thoughts, so that then that adds anxiety to you. Right? Even if I'm
Yeah.
not necessarily, like, I'm not going to act on them or anything like that. But, thoughts happen. I'm an addict. I still get urges. And I'm so, a part of me is afraid to share that with her, because then I'm afraid that she's just going to be in her head about it the whole day. And, like, I don't want to pull away from her day when, all right, I'll just internalize it and keep it
Yes.
to myself, and I'll try to work through it, which rarely ever
Never,
works.
never works. And I
No.
think the more that the thoughts get kept in, or the urges get kept in, whether it's releasing it to, a recovery partner or your partner, like, they just get darker. It just spirals, and then the shame starts, and it's just this vicious cycle.
Yep. Shame starts, and then it's like, well, I don't know how to get out of this other than going back to the old behaviors. The fire
Exactly.
is too big right now. I need to throw a dose of water on it. That's all that it is just a dose of water. Right? We're not actually treating it. We're not actually putting the fire out. We're just suppressing it for the time being with acting out. I had a therapist tell me once that kind of put things into perspective of, like, Alex, you're just trying to soothe yourself. You're just trying, by acting out, by using whatever it is, you're just trying to soothe yourself and nurture yourself. That's just the only way you know how to do it. And it was like,
Hmm.
okay, yep. It took some of the shame out of some of the behaviors a little bit. Because
Mm,
shame's a killer in this. And I'm sure you've had your own journey with shame. around this being the betrayed partner, being the betrayed daughter,
Yeah, like 100%, our like everything came out with my husband like a month and a half before our wedding. So like everything, invitations were out, like we were ready to get married. And this, my dad always struggled with pornography, and it was something that my, you know, my mom just sort of looked the other way, for lack of a better word. And I always knew it was like, just, I think at that, you know I could have gone either way, but I went the way of like, I know that I don't want this for my future. And so literally like every guy that I dated, like first or second date was like, well, how do you feel about pornography? Because I knew that I didn't want that in my relationship or in my marriage. So when it came down to my husband, he kept that. He kept that for almost 5 years. Um, when that, it was interesting. I was listening to, I don't know if you probably know her, Rosie McNeely's Fight for Love. I was listening to one of her podcasts, and she is a betrayed partner. I believe she was a betrayed partner in her first marriage and then also her second marriage.
Wow.
And that was the podcast that we were listening to. I remember it very well. It was pretty much, actually, it might have been the first week of February in 2019. And we were supposed to get married in April or May of 2020. And so we were driving along, and I was just like listening to this, and that was years of asking Ryan, like, so you don't look at porn, you don't, and like being like not as educated back then, I would worry like, okay, like if we aren't having, intimate relations, like I would always ask like, are you sure you haven't started? Like, cause I was just so, from what I grew up with, I was
Sure.
so paranoid. And, looking back, like Ryan's answer was never like, it was always like, his head was always downward turning when we talked about it. It was always like, I never want to do that. I would never do that, and like, and looking back, like I thought it was so sweet. I'm like, oh my gosh, here's this amazing man that can't even bear to talk about porn. Like that's how much he can't stand it. I found the perfect man. Yeah. And then we were listening to that podcast, and I was listening to it, and I'm just like thinking like in the car, like this is, my amazing man who also just cannot even bear to bring up porn. He can't even, every time I bring it up, or anytime I bring up, masturbation, anything, he's just like, so just can't even go there, and he's just so amazing. And we were listening to the podcast, and it was like talking about how like the best question to ask your husband is not, or your partner or boyfriend or whatever it is not like, do you look at porn? It was like, when was the last time you looked at porn? That's like a good question to ask them if you're like curious, if you're like, do they not, are they lying to me? Because it really stops them, and is like just a different way to ask it. And I remember looking over in the seat as he was driving, and just like tears like streaming down. And I just remember in that moment, I was like, this is it. Like, this is, our lives are like, he's not the man that I thought. Like, I just remember like just thinking in that moment, like my biggest fear just came true. I was about to marry my dad.
Mm. That's a powerful realization.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure, man, I can't even imagine what you were going through in that moment, the feelings. And, like you said, you were that close to being married, and the realization, man, oh my gosh. Like, and there's a good point too about like how to ask these questions,
Mm-hmm.
right? How can I ask these in a way to where like, I'm not going to shut somebody down? Because I think that, especially being an addict, we shut down really easily when it comes to these kinds of things. And yeah, that's, wow.
Yeah. And,
Wow.
I think that was part of it, is that, he knew my dad's story, and that was before my dad was even, officially, I don't know how to say that, but officially a sex addict. We'll talk about that down the road here in this, hopefully this podcast. But, I think he knew like, here is this girl who is the only person that has ever loved me. I don't know what. So it's the only person that has ever said I loved him, his childhood, I'm the only person. And he's like, I know that's her biggest fear. So I can't tell her. And he just, every time I want to stop. That was the last time. I want to stop. I
Mm.
will stop. You know, when we got engaged, like it was like, okay, we're engaged now. I will stop. You know, when we're going to get married, it'll stop then. Like just these lies that he continued to tell himself so that he would never have to tell me what he knew was my biggest fear.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, it's funny, like, because I had those same thoughts, and
Mhm.
if you go into an S room and you sit around the tables, and you know, I share this a lot, is like, yeah, my tape was, when I meet the right person, I'm gonna stop doing these things, and you look around the room and every guy's going, yep, yep, yep,
Mhm.
yep, me too. Like we really thought that these things were just a phase, they will stop, you know, or I can stop them on my own. I mean, I had more conversations than I can count with myself around, like, this is the last time, I don't want to do this anymore. Like that internal struggle, and then not knowing how to go about it. I didn't want to share it with my partner because, you know, she was the same. I mean, at that point in time, she was like, don't cheat on me, promise me you'll never cheat on me, while I was cheating on her, you know. And it's like, yeah, how do I say I can't promise that? Like, okay, yeah, you know, the answer is okay, yep, no problem. Like, yep, I promise, I
Mhm.
promise, I promise. And then, but knowing deep down inside, like, I was breaking that promise, and that was not a promise that I could
Yeah.
hold to her.
And that further spiraled you.
It's further spiraled me further. I just, and again, and I'm was stuck in a pursuit in a system that was so much deeper than me, that I'd had no awareness at all, and so, but you know, but again, the feelings that it causes in a partner, like, wow, I can't even imagine. I can't say that I've really ever been betrayed like that before, but I'm sure that that was just like a roller coaster for you. I mean, I'm sure it still kind of is a roller coaster for you to this day with everything.
To this day, yes, 100%. And I think, you know, that was when I had to make the decision. I mean, of course, I went in to fixing mode, which I'm kind of realizing now. We can talk about that, but I'm kind of realizing that I think that actually makes things worse and actually kind of perseverates and like kind of amplifies that victim role that Brian and addicts tend to take, is like, she's going to take care of me. She's going to do all the things, you know, and not putting that onus on them. But I did. I went into fixing mode and I was like, it was such a God thing because I was so, I remember calling my mom. My mom was always, they were still in Missouri. We were in Colorado. We're from Missouri. And I was like, she always told me, she's like, anytime you need me to fly out on a whim, I will be there. And I called her and I said, this is the time. Like, please fly here. And she did. And I had a dream about, you know, and I always wondered, like, you know, part of why we moved to Colorado. I definitely think BAI was a huge part of that because, you know, I had a dream. I was like, I wonder if there's a place nearby that can help someone with a porn addiction. And I Googled it. My counselor, I was like, do you know about this? She's like, yes, best of the best. Like, and it was like that Monday, and you know, the intensive start on a Saturday. So like we were kind of going back and forth with it. And then it was like Wednesday or Thursday, and they were like, no, like we're all full. And I just remember I was a PT at that point at our hospital, and Ryan worked at the same hospital. And like we just met on lunch break in the car. And it was just, it was he was so broken and so like, and I'm like, I just left and went up to my treatment room where I saw patients. I still was on my lunch break, and I just got down on my knees and I prayed and I said, God, like, if this is the man that I'm meant to marry, because I don't trust him at all. And I told Ryan that. I was like, I trust God, I don't trust you. Like, marrying you is going to be a God thing. And I just prayed, and literally, Alex, like that, like within a half an hour, Ryan got a call, and he was like, the administrative person at the AI was like, we had someone drop out and you can pack your bags and be there tomorrow. And it was like, wow, like I still to this day, like I'm just, God is such a big part of my life that I'm like, I really feel like God, you know, he has the ability to do anything. Like he was that person in that spot and he dropped out for my husband.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I know
I
that sounds crazy, but it's how I feel.
No, like, I don't think that that's crazy at all. You know, when God's involved in all of this stuff, like,
Right.
anything can happen, and that's
Anything can
something that,
happen.
like, I kind of lose sight of sometimes, and I need to be reminded of those things, that like everything happens for a reason. You know, you went to God and said, God, block or bless this, please, and God made a way. Like,
I made a
and
way.
that's what I found about spirituality, is like, I gotta make room for God. He's
Yes.
always there, but like he wants me to invite him in. He's always there. I know he's here with me with the podcast through my recovery, really trying to make him a focal point in my relationship as well. So it sounds like God was listening. God had you. Like I remember you sent me that story, and I remember
Yeah.
just like getting chills and reading that story. Like, wow, that's amazing, right? All right, like that. If can't think of a better billboard sign, burning bush from God. It's like, all right,
Right.
this is where we're supposed to be. This is what we're supposed to go through with.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, truly, it was like, and I always tell Ryan that verse, my power is made perfect in weakness. And I love
Mm.
that because like God wants to come into those broken places and fit and shine light. And you're the perfect example of that with what you do. And like, I just think it's just truly incredible. And I think that, I know there's like the difference of like SAA, and like, more higher power versus God, but it's like whatever, like you need something that's bigger than yourself, that's an absolute must.
It's a pillar of the program. I work in a treatment center now, so I'm always telling people, like, and a lot of people get hung up on the God aspect, right? Because God essentially is just the word that they use, right? You get to pick whatever it is, and people get so hung up on that, and it's like, I was watching Aaron Rodgers has a documentary on Netflix right now about his kind of journey and things like that. And he was talking about spirituality, and he was like, spirituality is essentially just leaving room for the miraculous.
Mm,
And I was like, man, that's a really good way. Like, we can go about our lives. And, I was raised in the church of like, hey, you want something to change? Pray for it.
mm,
Sit on your hands and pray for it.
mhm.
Whereas like in recovery, it's taught me like, yes, you can pray, but there's also actions you need to take. So
Yeah.
like, all right, let me pair my actions with spirituality. Let me do what I can, but then spirituality comes in and let me leave room for the miraculous.
Yes.
And I'm
Like,
like,
yeah,
oh
God
wow.
gives us free will.
And it's like but you have to believe in something bigger
Yes.
than you is out there. And I don't care what it is, believe in it, pray to it. It doesn't have to be this uniformed. I got to go to church and take communion, and it's simply just hitting my knees and asking God for guidance. God, just guide me.
Yes. Yes.
And I've been very surprised and amazed at what I've gotten back.
Yeah. Yes, that is so incredible. I was raised by a dad who was very like, you've got to go to church every single week. You've got to tithe this much. You've got to do this, and that. And that just, I mean, honestly, we can look at that and parallel it to like recovery too, right? Like do your check marks, do your back. It's not about, it's like, what do you need? Like, what do you need from God? What do you need from your recovery? What's gonna, like, it doesn't have to be this like check box. Like that's when that's a slippery slope.
Yes, like like you. I think you really hit it on the head. There is like I'd see people in church, but it's like, well, what are you doing for the other 6 days out of the week? What's going on internally with you? Yeah, you're showing up, and I see this in the program all the time. Guys show up, but are they really doing anything about it? And I
Yes.
think that's a lot of churchgoers, unfortunately. And I don't want to knock organized religion. I have my own views and opinions on organized religion, but it's very parallel to recovery in the
Yes.
sense
Well,
that like people show up, but they're not necessarily doing the work.
yeah. And what is the percentage like of like actual like organized religions is it's got, I think it's like 80 or 90% of men are looking at porn in the church. It's never talked about.
No,
It's
no,
never talked about.
no.
And there's this degree of like, and that was something that I was taught, which like my dad's gonna listen to this, but disclosure, I like didn't abide by it. But like, wait till you're married, like, wait till you're, all the things. And like this, like, I don't know. I feel like there's this degree in the church of like, be pure, do all the things, da da da. But then it's not talked about, and the men don't know how to manage their feelings. They don't know how to manage their urges. They don't know all the things, and they end up turning to porn. And then this, Christian, pure wife, whatever, ends up turning into their porn star, like for lack of a better way to say it. And that's a problem.
It is. Yeah. Yeah, that is. I recently went to my little brother is still very much involved in the church, and his mother-in-law reached out to me. She's a pastor. And she
Mm-hmm.
reached out to me and was like, hey, I like shared something on my personal Facebook about the podcast. And she reached out and she was like, hey, I want you to come to this healing and deliverance class that I do. And I was like, you know what? Like, I'm open minded. I'll I'll give it a go. Let's see. And one of the very first things she said was she was like, I don't believe in AA. I don't, and I'm like, I immediately am thinking the only reason that I'm in this seat right now is 12-step recovery. Like, so you're gonna bash 12-step recovery, and that is literally the reason why I am here. I'd love to see the statistics of people that are in 12-step recovery that weren't originally spiritual or religious, that got into 12-step recovery and then converted into going to church and, finding a relationship with God. And I bet the statistics there are wild. But
I
it's
bet.
like, hold on a second here. Like, don't knock something that is helping people, that literally brought me to this class. It was a 5-week class. I only went to 3, and then I was like, I'm done with this. I'm good.
I'm good.
I'm good. I'm all right. I'm okay. But yeah, it's just it's so interesting, like what organized religion does, especially if you grow up in that environment, and what's just it's not talked about. And I found for me, like, and you kind of said, like, sex is bad until you're married, and then it's great. Well,
Yeah.
here I am, is somebody that had to go to treatment specifically for sexual addiction. I'm a sex addict. Wow, I'm a bad person. I'm bad. And it's like I really had to like struggle with that, and wrestle with that, like, just because of what I was raised in. Now I'm really grateful for what I was raised in, because it did lay a foundation for me to be a believer in God and have that relationship with God. But there were just so many mixed signals and confusion that were there with it.
Yes. 100%. And honestly, I knew my pelvic floor background was going to come into this, and I like this is definitely it. Like I see so many patients with something that we call like vaginismus, which is very much so like nervous system driven. And it's where like the muscles literally guard so much that penetration cannot occur.
Hmm.
And a lot of those patients that I have seen are in the church. And it's because there is such shame around sex. There is such a degree of just like even like the way the patients have described it to me is like the build up to like the wedding night, and then it's like this is supposed to be this like just amazing thing that I can't talk about it though till that night, and then all of a sudden it's supposed to just be like amazing, and then I'm also probably with this man that is looked at porn to be able to abstain. It's just like this horrible cycle that really, yeah, like pelvic floor and the work that I see in women it plays into.
Yeah, wow, I would have never have thought of that. I mean, obviously that's not my experience, and you have experience with that, but wow, that is really interesting. And I think that it's awesome that you do get to work with women and that you're in that space to help people. Like, I think that that's awesome. So, like, okay, so going back to your story,
Yes.
and okay, so you have this discussion with Ryan. You call your mom out. You find BAI. Ryan gets into BAI. All right. So, like, how was that 2 weeks that Ryan's at BAI? And we were kind of touching on this a little bit before we started recording. Is that, like, it's awesome that BAI is there, and BAI does I'd like to hear your experience through the partner program, and all of that. Hey guys, I just want to take a minute to share something deeply personal and transformative in my journey of recovery. I've been where you might be right now, struggling with the weight of addiction and feeling lost. But there's a place that offered me a new beginning, a place I truly believe in. It's called Begin Again Institute. At Begin Again, they understand the deep-rooted trauma behind addiction. Their 14-day intensive program for men tackles the neurobiological aspects of addiction head on. It's not just about breaking a habit. It's about understanding and healing the underlying trauma that formed it in the first place. And for those who have been impacted by betrayal, Begin Again extends care to partners of addicts too. Their partner support program is offered at no additional cost to the family and runs alongside the men's intensive. This program helps participants gain an understanding of the trauma they've experienced and sets them on their own path to healing. If you or someone you love are grappling with sexual addiction, pornography addiction, or intimacy issues, Begin Again Institute can be that pivotal step towards recovery and a new lease on life. Remember, you can't go back and change the past, but it's never too late to begin again. To learn more about their life-changing program, visit beginagaininstitute.com or call 720-776-9076 to reserve your spot in the next 2-week intensive. I promise, it'll be the best call that you ever make for yourself. Stay strong, keep fighting, and keep tuning in to No Lions Here for more conversations about recovery, resilience, and hope. But we were talking, there's these resources out there for the guys. Like, hey, cool, there's the place that you can go that you can learn about your addiction, get away for 2 weeks, learn about your addiction. But then, hey, what am I? I'm leaving a mess behind. I've got a betrayed partner that's trying to go about life. They don't have the resources. So what was the 2 late weeks like for you while Ryan was at BAI?
That is such a good question. Honestly, absolute hell. And I think
Yeah.
because I was trying to plan a wedding, be the perfect bride, it was I had to show up for work. I had patients being like, "Oh my gosh, you must be getting so excited about the wedding." And I'm just like, if you only knew. And I feel like there's got to be some women out there that are going to be listening to this because I felt in a very unique boat. Like when BAI does an excellent job of giving the partners also a support group, but Alex, didn't feel like I could a lot of the women are, I mean, typically men are finding these things out and coming to this place at a much later stage in life, and to a much, it and so I felt like, these women they already had kids, which is it's not as hard then I feel like for because you have a piece of your partner, and I didn't have that, and I just felt so. And then I heard these stories and I was just this naive it's just, I don't say this now because I know now, but I was like, it's just porn. I can't be in this support group with these women that are saying these unbelievable things. I just felt so just out of place. And I think, I did hands down I was told not to marry him. I was told not to marry him. And I was just felt just really alone and in this position of all these women have been married for, 10 plus years, all pretty much all have kids with their partner. And I just felt yeah, it was just a very because they were talking about do I divorce him? And I was just over here I'm about to get married in a month and a half, And so I was literally I have to laugh because I was so scared. I didn't know. I almost pulled Ryan out of there because I didn't after going to the first support group, I was my husband or he was my fiance at that point. I was like, he's not this bad. I'm this is not the place for him. And I literally called BAI and I I think my mom ended up, I was like, Mom, please call. And and she ended up talking to Matt and he was just she's like, my daughter just wants to talk to her fiance and make sure he's okay. And Matt was like, she can't do that. This is designed this way. But I was a mess. I was like, I have to talk to you. I have to know if you're okay. I told Ryan, I felt like I was walking around with just half a heart. It was the worst, most unbearable 2 weeks ever. There's no way to sugarcoat that. And yeah, I was the crazy girl that called BAI begging to talk to him. And I almost busted him out of there.
You almost pulled the car up and said, come on, man, we're going. I'm knocking on the door. We're going.
I did. And I was just like, man, I mean, I don't even think I went to the last, honestly, I don't even think I went to the last few support groups because I was just so traumatized by the stories. But in retrospect, I am so glad that I heard them because it showed me just the degree of this addiction, the darkness of this addiction. And in retrospect, I'm so glad that I heard those women's stories. And I didn't I wasn't the women too were very angry and very, and I didn't feel that because I was about to get married and I was he hates this about himself. He doesn't want to do this. I just felt in such a different space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And everybody's got their own journey with it. Everybody has their own journey. And yeah, I've heard that about the support groups that some of them are really good. Some of them are, people and not BAI related at all, but there is the S-Anon groups and things like that for partners. And I've heard that some of them have just kind of made the feelings worse.
I felt that.
Have made things look at the anger can transfer, right? Especially in a group, you get one angry
Yes.
person and then that can kind of transfer. And if they're not doing the work that they need to do for themselves, because that's the other thing about all of this too, is like I have my journey that I have of my own recovery. My partner has her own journey.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, we can walk hand in hand, side by side, but if my partner's not necessarily doing the work, then
Mm-hmm.
there's gonna be issues there.
Yeah.
There's gonna be issues there.
Right.
So
Right.
when Ryan gets out after 2 weeks, is he sitting you down? Is he trying to like teach you about things?
Honestly, so, like, yes, like, after I just remember I wrote a journal of no, this is what I did. I didn't I wrote it, I eventually wrote it into a journal, but I texted him every night. And I also, like, I snuck, like, a like, note into his thing so that he had a note from me every day, but I also texted him even though I knew he wasn't getting it. And to read those back, like, the progression of the 2 weeks, like, I was just like, it was crazy. Like, I was like, I miss you so much. And then I'm like, this is it was just like all over the place. And when he got back, like, truly, like, that connection and that presentness that I had been missing for our whole relationship, when I didn't even realize really what I was missing, was like there.
Hmm.
It was there. And he was so different.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
different. Just like my dad, which we'll get to, is I'm like, who is this? You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I can see that. It's funny. While we were there, they were like, guys, don't get out and go try to like teach your partner about this stuff. They
Mm-hmm.
don't want to hear you preaching to them. They don't want to hear you teaching. But that's like all I wanted to do. I wanted
Yes.
to get out and I wanted to go back to my ex and be like, hey, this is what I learned. This is why I am the way that I am. And there's all this science behind it. And like, partners don't care about the science behind it. Like,
Unless you're
there's,
me.
there's,
Because I had already read like 3 books while he was in BAI, Alex.
you may be an exception to the rule then, but it's like all they don't want to hear. They don't want to be sat
Right.
down and get taught. Like like hey,
Right.
like they're there for they want to be emotionally supported and not informationally supported, right? And it's like, but
Yes.
that's all that I wanted to do. So I wonder if I had to ask, hey, did Ryan try to do that to you? Like, all right, here's my
Yeah.
PowerPoint from BAI. Sit
You
down and
know, I know. And I honestly think that he did because he knew how I was. And like he said, he knew that I was like already probably reading like tons of books, which I was. But like, I think too, like, yeah, I think overall though, like, I think whatever they learn, whatever, like, that is ultimately what the partner doesn't, they want to see it, they don't want you to just be like, here's like what I'm gonna do, like, here's the reasoning, they want to like see it, and that's what I wanted to deep down, even though I did feel like I needed to understand, like,
yeah.
I wanted to feel it and see it and have it shine through in our relationship.
Yeah. Well, I think that speaks to the character of who you are as a person is I want to know what my partner's dealing with. I
Mm-hmm.
want to know what they're dealing with so that I have some kind of idea. Again, you wanted to know there's some partners that don't want to know, that don't
Right.
care, this is your problem, deal with it.
Yeah.
And you wanted to be there. You wanted to be I see that as, hey, I want to support my partner through this.
Yeah.
I can see how much this has hurt him and how much this has carried. Yes, I still have hurt feelings and I'm betrayed and I got to work through that. But also, too, I think that speaks volumes to like just who you are as a person.
Thank you. No,
Yeah.
I think, and I don't know if I told you this, but I talk about it on my platform, but I have osteogenesis imperfecta, which is a really rare, it's a genetic condition, but mine was a mutation. And I've had like probably 20 plus bone fractures in my life and just went through a lot of medical trauma and things. And, Ryan, like, he was the only guy that I felt like I could tell. And that I felt like when I told, like, it wouldn't matter to him, and it didn't. And he researched it all, he did all the thing, and I just felt like, like, I don't know, just like this perfect match of like me, who isn't like physically bodied and able, like, meeting this person who, like, I felt so strong, mentally and emotionally. It was just like, how could I not do that for him is how I felt. Like I tried to parallel it, even though it is so much harder because I told him, like, and I've said this to him a lot of times, like my physical ailments, like if I fracture a femur, like it's not gonna hurt you to the degree of like that your addiction hurts me in the sense of,
Sure.
it's just like so
Yeah,
different
it is.
because it's
Yeah.
an emotional hurt that is
Mhm.
unlike anything.
Yeah. Like it really, emotional hurt is because obviously it has the lasting effects. Yeah, physical pain does too if you don't get it fixed the right way. But man, emotional pain, like it kind of gets buried. It gets buried
Yes.
under so much stuff.
Yes.
And so, like, so Ryan gets out of BAI. You're a different guy. Obviously, you guys went through with the marriage. You guys got married. What was it for you that was like, all right, like, here's the work that I need to do for myself to kind of keep myself sane
Yeah. That's
throughout
good.
this? What was some of the stuff that you felt like you needed to do for yourself?
Yeah, so I went to I have my own counselor who was also our couples counselor who kind of saw us pre BAI and post BAI. But most recently, since my dad's has come out, I started seeing like a betrayal partner like specialist, and that has been really helpful because it's helped me to. And I know she has like a support group that's actually coming up to start in February. That I'm thinking I'm at a place now where I'm like, okay, I think I'm not that like girl that I was when I was like, I think I can maybe handle a support group now. So, and that honestly has helped, tremendously for me, especially seeing someone that just knows the addiction. Like, I think, there's a degree of that that's just like has helped me so much more. But I think we went through this like really hard time because, like, it was like, okay, he's this changed man. Now we can get married, and now, like, so it was like this everything was so fast and it was so amazing. And I still remember it to our wedding day, like right before I was about to walk down the aisle. I was like, and our wedding day paralleled exactly what it was to like get married. Like it stormed like crazy. It was a spring day in Missouri, so you know how it is.
I know
I
how it
was like
is. Yes.
storming like crazy, and then the sun just came out, and I remember like it just felt like such a metaphor for our journey basically to the altar. And before I walked down the aisle, I just remember like praying, and I felt, the Holy Spirit is like the wind, and I felt this huge breeze, and I felt like that was God saying, like, you're where you're meant to be. Like, you are meant to marry this man.
Yeah. Wow. Wow.
Yeah, my dad walked me down the aisle, and I mean, we can kind of lead into this, but it was like my dad was I don't know if we want to call it undiagnosed sex
Und-
addict, but he was
yeah, we can
not.
call it that.
We call it that.
We can call it that. Yeah, we can call it that.
Handing me over to another sex addict. It was just, I mean, to think of that now, it was like, whoa, like that's a whole thing. But my dad ultimately, I can't even imagine the devastation that he was keeping in when he knew that I was marrying someone with his same addiction. And like deep down, I know that my dad knew he had a problem, but he's 68, so like it has been my whole childhood. And I just can't, like, my dad was the one that drove Ryan to BAI. Like he was the one that, and I just think back now that my dad's has come out and my dad has been to BAI, like I'm like, dang, like what the heck, like how hard was that for my dad. And like I know that my dad just wanted him to, like, I remember my dad crying after he calling me crying, just like hysterical after he dropped him off at BAI. And I was like, now looking back, I'm like, man, like Ryan did the thing that my dad couldn't do. Like my
Yeah.
dad even said, I could have never done that. He's like, I could not have stayed with that many men for that long in that house. Like my dad just, and then, yeah, we can kind of lead into that story, but I'm just like now thinking like, how did he do that?
Yeah.
How do you take him? But
Yeah.
he wanted for me what he basically knew. I said it this way when I found out all of my dad's stuff came out. I'm like, I mean, I flat out said this to my dad because I was so like the betrayal that I felt when Ryan's came out, the betrayal that I felt when my dad's came out, like Ryan broke me, but my dad shattered me.
Mm.
Yeah, I told my dad, I said, you were the monster that you were trying to protect me from all along. Like he always made a point to make sure that like I just met this, what we thought was this, and then when Ryan's addiction came out, like I just can't even imagine how my dad was feeling knowing that he was harboring the secrets that he was.
Yeah. Yeah. Real quick before we get into like the dad's side of the story, because
Yeah.
I think that it's incredible that you really got a double whammy of a situation here, and obviously we were talking this very God heavy conversation. God's got plans, and everything happens for a reason. So when Ryan gets out, and even up to this day, were there any like hard boundaries that you had to really put your foot down and say, hey, I've got boundaries now? Because as we know that boundaries are a big thing as addicts. I don't like boundaries. I have a hard time setting boundaries. I don't like when people set boundaries with me. I take it as a personal attack. Were there any, boundaries, hard boundaries that you had to set with Ryan right out of the gate and kind of maintain throughout things?
Yeah. So, I mean, we had an understanding that, like, if there was any sort of his acting out, any sort of his inner circles, like, he would report those to me within 24 hours, was kind of our rule, because I wanted to know, like, as soon as possible. And so that was a boundary. We also, like, later on had started being like, especially like after our son, and this was something that I got from the betrayal trauma specialist therapist. That was long, that was a lot, but that person, she said, is there, like, because it was so crazy with our baby and with like life, and like that changed everything. Like, it was like we had to, at the end of the day, was there anything left unsaid? And so that was like really huge for us, because we didn't have the time to connect and to check in like we used to. So that was a biggie. And then I think as well, like, I think there's just this degree of, like, I didn't know how to handle, like, check-ins. Like, I had one therapist that wasn't specifically like betrayal trauma, being like, you shouldn't do check-ins, you shouldn't do, like, how many calls have you been doing, like, and then my betrayal trauma specialist was like, that actually is like really good for you, because otherwise it's like, I don't know, like, I felt
Yeah.
like I needed to know, like, to be like, at like on Sundays, like, okay, how did your week go, like, that way I knew. Because I think there was like a part of me that was like, I told Ryan this. I was like, when it comes to being married to an addict, like, when the trust has been shattered the way that it has, it's almost like nothing, like, it's like if he went to the grocery store and bought like a bag of chips, and he came home and he's like, here, I bought a bag of chips. Like, that's kind of the only thing I feel like I can really believe, is like, yeah, I see the bag
Mm,
of chips. Like, you bought the bag of chips,
mm.
like, everything else, there's just you don't believe it, like, no matter how, like, the trust is so hard to build back. Like, it takes an instant to shatter and forever to build.
Yeah. Yeah. They say that, trust is lost by the bucket and gained back by the droplet.
I love it.
And
Yeah.
it's like, when you say it like that, it's like, oh my gosh, like that's the picture of that.
Yes.
Like, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, I'm sure that was really hard for you to go through,
Yeah,
just that trust piece.
that trust piece. And I think there's a degree of, like, and I'm still on this journey, honestly. It's like, at first, I tried to do everything, right? Like, I tried to get like the Covenant Eyes. I tried to get, then the Covenant Eyes did, I mean, Ryan is in IT, so found a way around Covenant Eyes. And so then we're like, okay, we're gonna try to do this other phone, and like that. And I eventually just got to the space of like, and some of the like wives in my support group, they were like, had a tracker on their car, had all the things. And I'm just like, I think I'm in this space now, Alex, and I feel like I'm maybe still getting here, but like, I'm like, it's on you. Like, I can't
Mm,
do all, like, you're going to find a way. Even if it gets down to the point where that way is in your own mind, like, you're fantasizing, you're doing, like, I can't, like, you know what I mean?
yeah,
Like,
you can't control you can't control his program, and that's definitely something that I struggled with, because I wanted that backstop, right? Oh, if I could just be in a relationship, I'd well, that's not they answered all my problems.
right.
Like, I had to really go through it. I wanted it, but I thought that those backstops would help me, when in reality it wouldn't have helped me. If my ex-girlfriend would have taken me back, yeah, that in the moment that may have solved my problems, but it really didn't. It was up to me. I have to
Yes.
be the one that's at the end of the day, did I do everything I needed to stay sober today?
Yes.
And that puts a lot of pressure on you too to try to manage that when, that's not your job. But we do this though. We want to fix other people
Yeah.
and we want to manage other people when it's like, hey man, like you got to do what you got to do. I
Yes. And
can
I think,
support you, but
yeah, I think ultimately that is something that I wish I would have learned because, and I do think like when like for my husband, like having that avoidant attachment as a child and then having me who did everything, like, and was like, I think that was almost hindering his recovery because he's
mm,
like, okay, like she's gonna take care of me, like she's gonna, and I think that was really hindering him. And I think I've really just found that out in these last couple weeks of like, it has to come from within. Like you have to get down there and pull out that strength, and it has to be you, you
yeah,
know?
yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
what, and then I'm sure that there's some confusion and frustration on the other side of that realization. I've found that with awareness comes confusion and frustration
Mhm.
sometimes because I want to know what that answer is. So you come to this realization of like, okay, hey man, like this is you. But then it's like, well, then what am I supposed to do?
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
And then trying to, because there is no blueprint here
Right.
there's a concrete list of the things that I shouldn't do. Yes.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
there's a fluid list of the things that, okay, these may work, but
Yeah.
we don't know though.
Right. Right. And I think like I totally agree with that. And I think that I think BAI does a good job of like figuring out, like just speaking from the place of like now that we had a baby, like I feel like BAI does a really good job of like meeting them where they're at. But then it is up to them, like different, like this is going to get thrown at you. This is going to be a life change. It's going to be a stressor. And yeah, like that has to come from you. And there is no blueprint for that because everybody's situation, every stressor is different, you know?
No. And there's no blueprint for the partner either. How do
No.
I navigate this?
Well, that's the hard thing. It's like like you do have, it ultimately is up to them, and caretaking them and doing all the things may actually make and exacerbate their problem. But then, like, can we talk about that? Then, like, your life is the one that's going to go up in shambles.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah,
hard pill to swallow.
it is. Yeah. Yeah, it's all about finding that gray area, right? Because you don't want to be that partner that just throws your hands up and says, "All right, screw it. This is on
Yeah.
you, man. Good luck."
Yeah.
That's kind of my mind. That's like that black and white thinking of like, "All right, well, screw it. Let me try to find this balance in the gray area of
Right. Yes.
how can I support you, but how can I also take care of me and not feel like I'm adding to your problem at all. And you also need to keep myself safe too."
I think that is so spot on. It is so much gray, and that is the challenge. That is the big challenge. And I think that yeah, it's I wish I had an answer for that, but I don't yet.
I don't know if anybody has like a solid answer to
Okay.
that. You know what I'm saying? Like, I
That's
don't
why
think
it's
anybody.
gray.
Exactly. Again, if we had solid answers to all of these things, because again, everybody's different, right? I see this all the time in recovery. What works for you may not work for me. What works for me may not work for you.
Right.
And I, man, if I could find that solution and bottle it up, that'd be awesome because I could use the money. But I don't think that I'm gonna. I don't think that it's in the time piece too. That's another big thing. And I know as an addict, I don't want to wait. I don't want it to the time. And I'm sure as a betrayed partner as well. Like, I don't want to. What if I don't want to put in the time? Because there's
Hmm.
no guarantee that things are going to change. But I have to give this time. I have to give this space. This is new. We're both fumbling around at this. I'm sure you felt that way in everything. It's just we're kind of fumbling through this right now.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think honestly, the biggest thing that has helped me, the biggest prayer that I have prayed as a partner is like, Lord, help me see Ryan how you do. Like, show me how you see my husband. I think that's been really helpful because he shows me like there's been so many times that I just see that broken little boy in Ryan. And I just think that prayer has been like, again, like, I personally could not do this journey without God. Like, I need him to show me how he sees Ryan. And I need to, honestly, at this point where Ryan and I are at, a few days before, because I know that things have been off for the last, since my son's almost 11 months. And, I just prayed really before kind of everything sort of erupted, was I just said, like, God, I just turned my husband over to you. Like, I just do, because like I was asking, like, are you still sober? How are you doing? And like he was just at this point of being so shut down that it didn't matter what I was trying to get out of him or what I like. So I just had to turn it over to God. And I think there's a point in recovery that it's just sort of, for me, it had to be that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's part of the solution. Right? But again, there's no instant gratification there with that.
Right.
But that is a big part of the program, no matter what you're doing, betrayed partner, addict. The solution is spiritual. It's 100% a spiritual solution, spiritual change. They say recovery is not I had this. I tell this to my clients all the time. Recovery is not like a I can't even think about it. Recovery is not it's not like a personal. It's not. I can't think of it. It's a spiritual program of action. That's what we get to. It's a spiritual program of action. It's
Yeah.
it's not a self-improvement program. It's a spiritual
Mm.
program of action.
Yeah.
All right. So you go through all this stuff with Ryan. You guys have a kid. Man, I can only imagine what that has added to the life.
Yeah.
And then, then you find out the dad, right? And it sounds like it's something that you kind of were aware of, knew that it was there, but it wasn't talked about. I mean, so what did that look like? I mean, talk about both two men
Yeah.
in your life now that were, big influences in your life, and now all of a sudden, now the dad's coming out and he's got these issues as well. What was that like for you?
Yeah. And it's true. It's like the only two men that I've ever trusted, yeah, ended up shattering my trust. Ended up really, and my dad, like, he took the addiction, I think, about as far as he could. Like, it was truly at the end of his rope. It's like, it's such a, like, I knew that my dad was, off, like, always, my whole life. Like, he always was extremely, you know, the way he treated my mom, it was horrible. And it was, the way that he acted, the way that, like, there were so many things, that the just, like, outbursts, the blow ups, like the cursing, like, just everything that, again, are these behaviors that this addiction and pornography ends up causing. He got to the end of that rope, and he was treating my mom the worst he's ever treated her. He was the most shut down he's ever been shut down. And I really think the birth of my son not only unearthed some traumas in my husband from childhood, but it also, I think, is what brought my dad's addiction out. And because my dad just wanted to be like the perfect grandpa, but he was, and so deep. And my dad, Ryan willingly was like, he was just like, I will go, I will do whatever I want, whatever you want. I want to get better. And my dad, when that came out, there was gaslighting. He fled the state in his RV. Like, I called the suicide hotline for him that week. And meanwhile, I have like a 6-month-old and, my own husband who's in his recovery. And basically Ryan used his story and was like, Kevin, like, that's my dad's name. Like, you have to go. Like, you will see the world different after you go. And my dad was just like, I'm 68. Like, I don't have, I don't have much, like, left, like, and he's just like, I can't do it. He's like, I cannot do it. I cannot go. My dad is not like a man's man. Like, he is not, like, the thought of going somewhere with men and being stuck with a bunch of men is probably the worst fear that you could ever think of for my dad. And he was too, like, he, like, Ryan was like my husband. He was like, I have a problem. I know. My dad was like belittling everything, like, oh, it was only this many times, oh, it's just vanilla porn, oh, it's just once a week, it was all the things. And he eventually just went, and I remember I was like, he was so at his end. He was suicidal. He just all the things. And he just went. And I remember when he was at BAI just being like, I don't know why he's there, because he says he doesn't have a problem, but like, I think Ryan used his story to really tell him, like, to really get him there. I just think something in my dad was like, he was just at the end of his rope. He was crying for help, but at the same time, he didn't want to lose this addiction because it's the only thing that he had ever known for the last 50 plus years. And, like I said, looking back, I'm like, man, like, my dad, all he wanted was for me to end up with somebody who wasn't like him. And then when my husband's addiction came out, how he must have felt. And then he drove him to BA, and I think was just completely shattered, because he's like, there's the man that my daughter's going to marry doing the one thing that I could never do. And then fast forward, and he's at the end of his rope, everything comes out, and he goes.
Yeah. Wow. That's now with this being so obviously, you had your husband go through, and then you have your dad go through. Is there any part of you that with your dad where you're able to kind of like disconnect from that at all? Because it's not your live-in partner. It's not somebody that you're married with. Obviously you're with your husband, your partner all the time. Whereas family, we can kind of create some distance, some space between family. Were you ever able to kind of do that at all? Or was it all just kind of muddied together?
That's such a good question. So I'm an only child, and I'm an only child with a physical disability. And that created, without me even knowing it, and I know you can speak to this because I've listened to your show, enmeshment.
Mm.
And I say this all the time. Growing up, my dad was addicted to pornography. He treated my mom horrible. They grew more and more distant, right? Because that division that porn creates this addiction creates in a marriage. And my mom poured everything into me, and I was my mom's husband, and I was my dad's wife. Like, that's
Yeah.
how I felt. So when this came out, Alex, I actually felt like it's crazy, right? Like, only people that have been enmeshed will understand this, but I felt like every action that my dad did that came out, I felt like it was done onto me
Mm.
because of the enmeshment. I
Mm.
felt like I had been cheated on. I felt like I had, like, it was crazy. Like, I still am going through that. Like, I feel married to two men because of the degree of enmeshment that I have with my parents. And that's really
Wow.
complex, and I'm still
Yeah.
working through that.
Yeah, that's very complex. Again, going back to the childhood, right? Like everything goes back to the childhood. These layers, these relationships, they run so deep. Like the
So deep.
relationships that we have with our family, getting into recovery or any kind of betrayal kind of work, like you realize, wow, that was really, really messy. And I don't know how I'm going to get through that. Cause yeah, you can create that space, but at the end of the day, you got to heal those inside of you
Yes.
so that then we don't pass those along, to our offspring.
Yes. And that is where I feel so strongly with my son, that it ends with us.
Yeah.
It ends with us because my dad had an addiction. 100% probably sure that Ryan's dad has an addiction with the things that he was exposed to. Ryan has an addiction. My mom, like, she just, the resentment that she had towards my dad and the resentment that he had towards her, I think there was a degree of, like, again, them pouring themselves into me and not each other. But then, I told my mom, like, right before his addiction came out, we had the worst possible, it was Kevlin, my son's first vacation, and my dad was the worst he's ever been. That was right before it all came out. And I told my mom, I said, because my husband was helping my dad with something on his tablet, and he found a lot of porn. And my husband came to me with it, and I'm just like, I told my mom, I was like, that's where I had to draw a hard boundary, because I was like, my dad literally put my husband's inner circle right into his hands
Yep.
without and so I was like, this has to stop. And I told my mom, I said, you don't, like, you've never hated the porn, like, why don't you hate the porn? Like, you don't hate it as much as I do you? And she's like, no. This was before my dad got treatment. She's like, no, like, it's just, it's his thing, it doesn't really bother me. And of course I'm like, mom, it's the reason for everything. Like, it's the reason for the way he treats you, it's the reason for the way he shows up as a husband and a father. Like, and I just remember like being like, oh, like, I just wanted to, but you can't force awareness,
Yep.
right? And so like, when it all came out and my mom was just in shambles and she saw it all, and she was getting she's starting her own counseling now. And she's like, and I'm like, I told her, like, it had to have been like a month or two ago. I'm like, you hate the porn now, don't you? And she's like, I hate it. I'm like,
Yeah.
I knew you would.
Yeah. The lack of awareness there, because I'm sure your mom, I'm sure your mom was like, oh, well, keeps him off of me, so I'm good.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't gotta deal with him. So whatever he wants
That
to do.
Yes, the porn saved her almost. And I think that's the case for a lot of women. And it's, your husband is drowning. That's all I
Yeah.
got to say is your husband is drowning. You
Yeah.
think it's saving you, it's not.
Yeah. And then I know for sure, like, and I know that this has been something that I've thought about too, is like, because with the enmeshment background, it's like, all right, when I do have a kid of my own, learning how to keep the relationship separate and to not, hey, me and your mom, we've got our own relationship and we look to each other, and there's things that you are not allowed to be included in because that's a different relationship.
Yes.
That's a different relationship. Her and I have one, and there's times where like I'll have to like stand up for her,
Right.
in that with the kid. Like, hey, you can't talk to my partner like that.
Yes.
I get that she's your mom, but she's also my partner, and I'm gonna step up and I'm gonna protect her because you can't talk to her like that. Or, hey, this is mom and dad stuff. We'll fill you in and we can have those conversations, but for the time being, this is our thing. We need to keep that separate. That's something that's definitely big on my mind, because I'm so afraid, and I'm sure that there's fear there for you in having the kid, of like, do we repeat this pattern?
Yes.
Because like I don't want to repeat the pattern. I want to break the pattern, right? That's why we're here. That's why we're talking right now, is
Yes.
to break the cycle, break that pattern. And like, because like I don't
Yeah.
want to continue that, because I remember growing up thinking, I don't want to be like my dad. I've seen my dad lives this double life, and then having that realization of I'm doing exactly what my dad did. And
Yes.
like, I don't want to
Yes.
do that anymore. It made me sick to like think about it like that. Like, oh, I don't want to do what they did. I love my parents. I'm grateful for what they've done for me. They were
Yeah.
doing the best that they could with what they
Right.
had, but
100%.
also too, like, hey, I don't want that.
Yes. Yes. And I think that's a huge thing to like, that I've been trying to communicate to my parents is like, just because there was this bad thing, right? Like, porn was in our house, and it was not recognized. My dad's addiction was not, brought to the forefront and treated like it should have been, but like, it doesn't make the rest bad, right? Like, there was so much else good, but yeah, to be the generation, and I think our generation, are you a millennial, Alex?
I am, yeah.
Okay, yeah,
Yep.
me too. We're like, we have to admit it, yes, we are. But I really do think that like our generation is the generation that, not all of us, but there's a lot more of us that are like, this stops here. Like,
Yeah.
we have so much more degree of tools now. And I think there is a degree of like the baby boomers, like seeing it as like, well, I must have done everything wrong. And it's not true. Like, it's just that we are the generation that is, some of us breaking these cycles, and it's uncomfortable, and it's not easy, and it's messy, and it's, like, I have so many friends that like aren't doing that, and everything seems perfect for them. But is it?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah. Well, we live in that Instagram type lifestyle now, where let's make, and the lifestyle that I grew up is like the picket fence and the manicured lawn. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter what the inside of the house looks like. We've got the picket fence and the manicured lawn with the flagpole and
Yes.
the flag raised.
Yep.
Doesn't matter what's going on inside the house. The inside of the house could be falling apart, but the outside looks good.
Also, it
We're
looks
good.
perfect.
We're good to go. We're good to go. And that was definitely something that like drew me to my partner, was just like the way that she parents her daughter.
Mm,
And like I see the way that she parents and tries to discuss things with her daughter, and talk about the feelings, and she'll ask me all the time. She's like, "Do you think I'm doing a good job? Do you think?" And I'm like, "Babe, look at this. Like, your daughter's 11. Your daughter wants to do everything with us. She's
mm,
always wants to be around us. She always wants to go and do the things. She gets mad when we take her to school and then we go on a hike because she wants to go on a hike with us." And I'm like, think about when you were 11 years old.
yeah.
Did you want this much involvement with your parents?
Mm,
And the answer for me was no. And the answer for her was no, too. So it's like, okay, clearly you're doing something right here because your daughter wants to be involved with you. She wants to spend time with you. She's always asking for time with you. And you can hear her and you can give that to her. And we're
right.
giving that to her.
Yeah. Yes.
And it's like,
100%.
okay, that's how I want my relationship with my kids. I want them to be around me, but also, too, I need to be able to step up and say, hey, this isn't for you right now.
Yes. Yes. I think that is so, so key. And that's so key to avoiding the enmeshment is like what, and like, yeah, that is so key. Yes.
Yeah. So your dad gets out of BAI. How are things? How's the relationship now? How is he doing? How are you doing with all of that stuff?
Yeah. So like I said, that after my dad's came out, that was when I found like actually a betrayal trauma therapist. And so that has been really helpful for me. I honestly didn't have a relationship with my dad after he went to a September one, like mid September. But I recently called him a few weeks ago because of, a relapse has happened in my husband's journey. Like I said, because of some unearthed traumas I think that our son brought out. And so, my dad's just always been, despite everything, despite the pain that his addiction caused, he's always been like my go-to person for like when something is really, really bad or like really, really wrong. Like, my mom, I'm like close with, and there's obviously been a strain in that relationship with like, hey, like you just looked the other way. And I'm working through a lot of that still,
Mm-hmm.
but I did call my dad for the first time. And yeah, he's, and with my husband's struggles right now, it's almost like now he can empathize. It's just like the perfect order that I still feel like it's a mess, but I feel like God had my husband's come out. And then that way, my husband could lead my dad to recovery. And then now that my husband is really struggling, now my dad is able to empathize with him, because my husband had always said that he's like, back when he got out of BAI, he's like, I just wish that my biggest wish is that your dad would just, I know how much it's hurt you. And it's hurt me in so many ways, but it's hurt me in a degree of like, I struggled with disordered eating for over a decade because of the objectification that my dad made known to me about women and what was ideal and what he thought men would like. And so there's that whole aspect of things. But like, he knew how much my dad's addiction to pornography hurt me in so many ways and in that way too. And he's like, I wish that we could just go on this journey together. And I was like, thinking to myself, like, that's never going to happen, because I know my dad, he is so stuck in his ways. And then he ended up going to BAI. And then now we're in this place of like, Ryan really needs help. And my dad, even though our relationship has a far way to go, and his relationship with Ryan, I don't know. I just feel like that God's gonna work something really beautiful in that. And that's
Yeah.
kind of where we're at today. Yeah. I don't know. It's just like I always think of that verse too, like he delights in the details. And it's like all this stuff, like I write it down because like then you go back and you're just like, he's just a God of details, It's just
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. It's so hard to just trust the process.
It's so
And
hard.
like, and that is, that's a big thing that you hear in recovery. Just trust the process. Keep coming back, trust the process. And it's like, okay, I want to trust the process, but I also want this process to be done. Like
Yeah.
I want to be back to a carefree, happy, but it's like, but does that even exist? To some extent it existed in addiction because I was so blind to things.
Yes.
And yeah, I was showing up for my relationship. Yeah, I was doing these things on the side, but I was also showing up to the best, showing up in air quotes there, because was I really showing up? No, I wasn't. But now that all the mystery's gone from everything, I mean, this is a lot to work through. This is not easy work. That's why, if it was easy work, we wouldn't be here talking right now, because everybody would just be fine. But trusting the process is just so hard, right? That's why they talk about, one day at a time, just for today. That's all I got.
One day. Yes, I love that. And someone like me who is so like, I've always been so career driven, so did it like the next thing. It's like it's really hard to do that. And I
Yeah.
love that, like one day at a time, because it is like, yeah, it really, really is.
Yeah, it is. It's not easy. This is not for the faint of heart, but if you can make it through it, there's always good on the other side. Life's always going to happen, but there is good that comes from all of this.
Yes.
And I love that for your family too. That just that generational healing. Two generations here trying to do what they can to heal.
Yes. 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 And I always worried about my dad like showing up as a grandpa. Like I'm just like he's going, cuz he would always, that was part of what led into my eating disorder, was like he would make comments about women's bodies and body image and I'm just like I was like this can't happen with my son, and I never knew how we would get past that, and how I would not have to see my son or have my son see his grandparents like his grandpa treating his grandma horribly, like. And now that this is to light, like I'm like, wow, I see that future. Like I see that I'm not going to have to, like, my dad is doing his work and it's amazing. And I never, ever would have thought, like, and even my dad said that when I talked to him, he was just like, these men are the greatest thing that has ever happened to me. And for my dad, anybody who knows my dad, for him to say that, like he had before, like no friends, like I said, not a man's man, like all, for him to say that, it's like, wow. And like I said, has opened up this door for this whole new empathy for Ryan. And I just really believe that both of them, the two men that shattered my trust, the only two men that I trusted that ended up having the same addiction, I really think God is going to work for good to break this cycle for my son.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
After BAI, I'd always wanted a little girl because I love shopping. Like I'm a girl's girl. And, after BAI, I was like, I told Ryan, I said, I really think that God is going to give us a son. I really do. And it was crazy when I got pregnant. I still really wanted a girl, but I felt that it was a boy. And yeah, it's so cool. Like I'm just so excited for what this little boy is already doing, like already changing, brought out my dad's addiction, is healing things in Ryan that he didn't even know was there. Like it's just really, really cool.
Yeah.
Such a
That's
God
awesome.
thing.
Yeah. That's awesome. God is involved, and we have a choice though, right? We have a choice to see that, right? Which is again really hard to do. Perspective and choice and change. And if I can make that choice to see the good in my life and what God is doing and what God's hands are, it takes the pressure off of me, that I don't have to figure this all out on my own. There's
It's
something out
everything.
there.
It's perspective. Like it really is, because it's so easy to look at the other side when you're in that valley. And like I always say this, like the richest soil is in the valley. Like that's where we are going to grow the most. Like that's where, like, we've got to see it for that. And it's hard to do. It's so hard to do. When you do, it changes everything.
It really does. It really does. Because those valleys are always going to come. The peaks are going to come and the valleys are going to come, right? We're going to
Right.
constantly going up and down, up and
And
down.
down.
And
Yeah.
so it's stick with the process, trust the process. Some days it's harder than others to do that, though. That's for
For sure. For sure.
Well, Nicole, I really appreciate you coming on today and giving us your time and sharing your story. Like again, the willingness and the courage that you're modeling through all of this is absolutely amazing. And I think that there's a lot that people can get from this, especially on the betrayed partner side. And I'd love to have you back on. Again, there's things that we could continue talking about. So I'd love to have you back on. Maybe at some point in time have you and Ryan on as well, if that's something he'd be open to. But Nicole, thank you so much for everything. I really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun. You did a really good job. You killed it. So
Thank you.
yeah,
I would
thank you
love
so
to be
much.
back on. I really appreciate it. This was healing for me. Like it
Yeah.
really was. This was amazing.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it's so funny. I'm still so surprised, even though I've done this so many times. I'm still so surprised that on the other side of these conversations, like I'm like, oh wow, like I feel good.
Hmm.
I feel good. The conversation they always fly by. They fly by. We've been talking for an hour and 20 minutes now at this point, and like it just flies by. So again, Nicole, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me for you to come on and share your story and just breaking the cycle.
Yes.
Breaking the cycle, breaking the pattern. So, Nicole, thank you so much. And thank you so much to everybody for listening right now. Go check out all the episodes on Spotify and YouTube. No Lions Here. If you have any questions or any topics that you want me to discuss, please feel free to email me, nolionshere@gmail.com. And as always, keep coming back. It works if you work it, and you're worth it. We'll see you guys next time. Yeah, no suicide.